Get to know Texas politics. RagingElePhantsRadio.com.
And welcome back, patriots and activists of Texas. We are starting, well, we're a little bit into our second hour of broadcast activism today here on Raging Elephants Radio, where we are the rebellious voice of liberty across Texas. I have a new guest to bring to you today, and this is in response to an article that I read on Hardhatters.com. Now, I have brought you information from Hardhatters before, and this one is particularly right up my alley because it has to do with cronyism in Texas. No surprise to you, activists, because you're well aware of the plutocracy of Texas. But to help me go over this article, I've brought the author. He is the editor of Hardhatters.com. Hal Hawkins is a native Texan and a lifelong conservative. He is the founder-creator of BrazosDebtClock.org, the first local debt clock in the entire country. And that's significant, y'all, because, as you know, I speak at great length about the dire straits of local debt here in Texas, putting us as three peas in a pods with New York State and California as far as the depth and breadth of our local debt goes. So he's got his fingers on what's going on in Brazos County. He's also been the former communications chairman for the Republican Party of Brazos County, and he's been a campaign consultant. He's been he's been a lot of things in business, in real estate, and in publishing. So he's our first-time guest here. He's got a BS in business administration and an MBA from UT Arlington. So welcome to Raging Elephants Radio, Hal Hawkins, for the first time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you wrote an article that caught my eye and which I immediately devoured. It's called, the title of it is Perry, Dewhurst, Strauss, and now George P. Bush doubled down on cronyism in Texas. You're not telling me anything I don't already know, but could you go through, just describe your article for the edification of my listeners?
Well, this was a follow-up article from a report we had done last year on the Emerging Technology Fund and the Texas Enterprise Fund. And we'd seen reports on this from left-leaning agencies like Dallas Morning News, Texans for Public Justice, and we wanted to sort of fact-check their reports, and we went in a little deeper than they had and found exactly the sort of political relationships that had developed through these funds, and we'd seen what these funds were actually doing. And the article you're referencing is basically a year later. We're following up, seeing if the practice is continuing, what's going on. Are they backing off due to the criticism, or are they doubling down? And it seems like the train is still rolling full steam ahead.
Well, I'm looking at this picture on your page, and I did put the link into the chat room for our hardcore listeners who are in there. You've got a picture of Governor Perry, and, back at CPAC last month, he debuted his new look. Governor Goodhair has got a new look and is coming across as much more hipster now with his dark black rimmed glasses and everything. And so I'm looking at him going, yep, new look. However, you say in your article, the very first sentence, Governor Perry might have a new look, yuppie glasses and all, but it is still business as usual in Austin. And of course, you grabbed me with that first sentence because we know that the business in Austin is not actually citizen representation or citizen legislation. It is what we call here at Raging Elephants Radio a plutocracy, and that's governance by those with money, and the politicians being completely and entirely controlled by those with the funds, those that pay into their coffers, and the money is then returned, but it's taxpayer dollars that are then returned to the cronies. Can you define or describe that cycle for my listeners, please?
Well, first off, correlation doesn't mean causation, but the relationship is obviously highly suspect. And what we've seen is there's several funds. There's the Texas Enterprise Fund, the Emerging Technology Fund, there's the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas, and there's the Texas Events Fund. And all of these funds are designed to grant public money to private corporations for either research or, to bring jobs and business to Texas. And what you're seeing is not all, but many of these companies are highly successful, multi-billion-dollar companies that are receiving our money to bring jobs to Texas. And in return, many of these companies have, either through their lobbying groups, their PACs, or their own executives have donated tens of millions to the politicians who control these funds.
Mm-hmm.
The Texas Enterprise Fund, the process, the awards process is approved by just Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss. Those are the three who approve the awards in the Texas Enterprise Fund. And so that's what we went and looked at to see what sort of relationships politically, as far as campaign contributions, what relationship there was between those three and the companies that were receiving these awards.
Well, let's talk about the Texas Enterprise Fund for a minute, because we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. We're not even talking about tens of millions. We're actually discussing a fund that has hundreds of millions of Texas tax dollars.
Right, and this was created by Perry back in 2003, 2004, and combined with the Emerging Technology Fund, which is very similar in practice. They've awarded at the end of this, by the end of 2014, they will have awarded over $1 billion to these companies, and what's so funny is when you look at the amount that CPRIT has given away, which is closing in on $1 billion, you look at the Events Fund that's given away nearly $300 million. You're talking about upwards of $2.3 billion over the past 10 years that have been given away, of taxpayer money that's been given away, and yet we can't find money in our budget for transportation, water, and education. And clearly our priorities are not in the right place.
Clearly. Now, you said before that 3 individuals control the Texas Enterprise Fund.
Correct. The sole committee, the committee for awarding or making the awards for the Texas Enterprise, are delegated to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. Those are the 3 who decide. They make up the award committee for the Texas Enterprise Fund.
Now, wasn't a law passed? It says here in your article, a law was passed this past session, to audit the fund.
Well, yes, and sort of, but one thing I did update, or at least from the report from last year, is they also made it the rules or the reporting rules with Texas Enterprise Fund less stringent for. Instead of, especially for the Emerging Technology Fund, the fund no longer requires award recipients to post the exact number of jobs they created. That's supposed to be one of the reporting requirements. Is you get X amount of money and you have to tell us how many jobs you're creating to sort of justify the award. And instead now instead of posting the exact number of jobs, they can just choose increments of 10 and report within plus or minus 5. So it gives a little more leeway as far as transparency is concerned to what our money is being used for. And what you're seeing as well is, many of these companies aren't compliant with the rules of the award, and some of them have even ceased operations and filed bankruptcy. And I think total of about 20 or 25 companies are not compliant or have failed, and that total amount of awards is upwards of $40 million. So we've lost money on this as well, and nobody seems to be batting, an eye towards that.
Well, when you've got three people in charge of picking winners and losers, in other words, they're cronies over others who may not be so politically connected. You've got Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss, and I don't think anybody's ever accused Perry or Dewhurst of being the sharpest crayons in the box. Strauss himself, we know how shrewd and canny he is. But you said in your article that from 2013 to today, over $48 million of Texans' tax dollars have been passed on to companies, Texas Enterprise Fund, whose combined annual revenues surpass $400 billion. $48 million of Texas taxpayer money has gone to companies over $400 billion in revenue.
Right.
Do they really need our tax dollars when we can't fix our roads?
Right, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, because that's just in the past year.
That's just 1 year.
Yeah, and that doesn't include companies like Visa or Facebook or Apple, which are multi-billion-dollar companies, very profitable, very successful companies that we've given money to through the Texas Enterprise Fund. And, when you have such a minute amount of money going to these companies that, to them it's just pennies. It's not even pennies, it's fractions of a penny. Do they really need that money? Is that fraction of a penny what's keeping them from coming to Texas? And I have to disagree. That I think they were going to come to Texas anyway, and this is just a matter of shoring up political capital and shoring up political support, because and of course these companies want to be profitable too. They want to make as much money as possible, but they're making it they're being enriched at the expense of Texas taxpayers.
Well, you point out that the Texas Enterprise Fund has reached over $519 million in awards since the fund began in 2003, and then you add, just to put this in perspective for your readers and my listeners, the total amount that this one fund, just one, and there's other multiple funds going on out there, has given would very nearly fund our entire Department of Agriculture for a year.
Right. Our Department of Agriculture's budget is about $530 million, and so if we had just, if we had never even created the fund to begin with, we could have funded one of our biggest agencies for an entire year, and that just goes to show how much, just the enormity of it all, as far as what our priorities are. About 50% of the agriculture department, 50% of its budget is for free and reduced lunch program for schools, and so whether you agree with the program or not, that's a major program that requires a lot of money, and yet we're always struggling to find money for those programs, and yet no one is looking over to the unnecessary programs, or whether you think they're good ideas or not. They certainly don't trump or shouldn't trump priorities like education, agriculture, things that make Texas.
You have here, you kind of close the loop. You kind of come full circle. You say that 9 out of the 15 companies that were awarded just last year, just in this 1 year, have employed Austin lobbyists or donated either through their company, their employees, or their lobbyists that they've hired to the campaign war chest of Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss. And then you say overall, Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss have received a combined $1.063 million in contributions from these recipients, reaching a total of $11 million from every TEF award recipient.
Well, as far as we know, that's as far as we know. It's possible there's more, but
sure, from other funds, especially.
That's what we found. Yeah, and there's no proof that. Hey, they're all sitting in this back room saying, yeah, you give me this money and we'll give you this much in campaign contributions. I mean, obviously that would be highly illegal, but also there's no proof. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring awareness to the issue, to the situation, that there is correlation, that there is a a potential relationship here. For example, the Athena Health that's owned and by a very close cousin of George P. Bush, our presumably next land commissioner,
right? And
just got awarded this, and he's not going to be creating a whole lot of jobs in Texas, and yes, we need jobs, but why Athena Health out of all companies? And not to say that people are nudging each other, saying, "Yeah, help my cousin out, help my family out," but the relationship still makes you raise an eyebrow and say, "Hey, maybe we need to re-examine how this process works."
We're definitely doing more than raising an eyebrow, and I want to drill down a little bit on Athena Health and some of these other big names that are receiving Texas tax dollars. Hal, can I keep you through the break? Would you be able to come back for another segment after the break?
Absolutely.
Okay, outstanding. Folks, I'm talking to Hal Hawkins of Hardhatters.com. We're going to be back with more right after these messages. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to start getting into some numbers here. And as you know, I'm a big one for numbers. We're going to drill down on Athena Health and its connection to the Bush family. We're going to look into a few others as well. We've got more with Hal Hawkins right after this. You are sick of them. Those rhinos. Not the ones in D.C., the ones in Austin. The ones that are pro-abortion, pro-amnesty, and increase Texas government spending, debt, and bloating without blinking an eye. RagingElephants.org is the Texas PAC created to remove the rhinos and help truly fiscally conservative, liberty-minded candidates win Texas elections. Your $10 a month donation funds the removal of the rhinos. $10 a month to bring down the plutocratic establishment. Leading America's second emancipation, RagingElephants.org.
Invite an RER broadcast activist to your next event. Click on the Request a Speaker button on RagingElephantsRadio.com.
What do you care about Washington, D.C.? D.C. doesn't care about you. You're a Texan. You're a Texan above all else. And there's only one radio station that's going to feed your need for Texas power and independence. RagingElephantsRadio.com. Finally, the Patriots of the Lone Star State have a unified voice to fight back and organize. 24/7, 365. RagingElephantsRadio.com is going to give you what you need to know about Texas politics, liberty, and independence. Take us wherever you go. RagingElephantsRadio.com. Streaming on your computer, smartphone, tablet, and internet auto.
Have you ever found yourself hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, or anywhere else in the great outdoors? What about your own backyard? Stupid question, right? But how many times have you found yourself in one of those places without the right tools? Patriot Paracords wants to make sure that you're prepared for whatever's out there. They offer high-quality and affordable paracord gear like gun slings, survival bracelets, dog leashes and collars, keychains, knife straps, and more. We use the toughest 550-pound test line cord and can customize individual items by size and color. So if you want to be prepared for the unknown or just find yourself wanting to be fashionable, then you need to call Patriot Paracords at 409-960-1284. You can also find us on Facebook by searching The Patriot Paracords. Call 409-960-1284 or on Facebook search for The Patriot Paracords. You'll be pleased with the results, the craftsmanship, and the service. Prepare like a patriot with Patriot Paracords.
And welcome back. You're listening to my interview with Hal Hawkins of Hardhatters.com, who has been following for over a year and reporting on these special funds. Not just one, but there are multiple special funds set up. And you know that I've reported on them significantly as they became a source of contention in the primary for comptroller. So we're going to talk about several companies, and welcome back, Hal, to Raging Elephants Radio. Thank you for sticking with me through the break.
Not a problem.
All right. So in your report, you've got a PDF here of a number of companies, and for the most part, with the exception of 3 of them, they're all multiple billion-dollar companies. Chevron has not gotten just 1 award from the Texas Enterprise Fund, but 2, and they're a $220 billion company. And they get $12 million in Texas tax dollars. National Instruments, Tenaris, Kohl's Department Stores, Dow Chemical. I'm sorry, I read Dow Chemical and Chevron backwards. Dow Chemical is the one that got the two donations, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
So I said that backwards. I was looking at Chevron and saying the wrong thing. Dropbox, Oracle have all gotten their share of Texas tax dollars, more than their share, USAA. And specifically, you mentioned Athena. And the reason that Athena, I think, is noteworthy is because it's owned and run by Jonathan S. Bush, who is the cousin of our newly anointed land commissioner, George P. Bush, who won that seat without lifting a finger. And they received a rather hefty award of $5 million. And they are not one of the billion-dollar companies, but they did get it. They did get more from the Texas Enterprise Fund than others like Oracle or Dropbox or National Instruments.
Correct. And the way the fund works is essentially the companies promise to invest a certain amount of capital jobs in the state of Texas. And generally you'll see the investments or the promised investments in Texas anywhere in the tens of millions to the hundreds of millions. I've even seen $1 billion range. Mm-hmm. And so they get relatively small amounts compared to their amount of investment. Mm-hmm. But what was questionable was such a low amount of investment by Athena Health and in proportion to the award. That's pretty good deal. They're getting almost 2-to-1 on their money from the award.
They really are, because they're only promising to invest 13, and they're getting 5. So that's well over a third.
Right, exactly. And so, like I said, there's no proof that George P. Bush or George W. Bush was nudging Perry and Dewhurst saying, "Hey, help my cousin out." But the relationship's obviously there. Jonathan S. Bush has a relationship with George P. He's donated to his campaign, so there is some communication going on between the two. And so, whether or not the relationship played a role in getting the award, is unknown. But like I said, the relationship's there, and it just looks inappropriate.
And the timing,
like favoritism, yes. The
timing is suspect.
Exactly. It's just a couple of months before the election,
right?
Or the primary,
right?
So.
Okay, you mentioned in your article, you also mentioned another award recipient, Ascend Performance Materials, which you say has a record of using bully tactics to receive government assistance. Tell us about Ascend Performance Materials, because they got $1 million of Texan tax dollars.
Well, they're based, if I'm not mistaken, they're based out of Brazoria County, mm-hmm. And they already received tax abatements from the county, and they were wanting to, or they had been receiving tax abatements from the community college there.
Alvin Community College.
Yeah, correct. And they were planning on investing $1.2 billion back in Brazoria County, but they were demanding additional tax abatements, and or else they, as the reports were saying, they were going to move their project to Louisiana if they didn't get it. And the community college board just said, "Hey, we can't afford to give you any more abatements. We've already given you we'd already given you one, and we just can't afford to give an extension to it." And that was a 10-year extension. And mm-hmm. So Ascend hasn't, as far as I know, Ascend hasn't made a decision whether to move the project or not. But that is an example of bully tactics of true crony capitalism, where companies are using their clout, especially through tax revenue, to get what they want, and holding smaller governments that don't have as much revenue to rely on, holding them hostage.
I've got a lot of listeners in Brazoria County. In fact, two of their, actually three, very active Tea Parties over there. Lake Jackson, Alvin, Tea Party Patriots, and Pearland Tea Party have all kept me very close in the loop of what happens over there in Brazoria County. And of course, I am right here in League City, Hal. You didn't know that, but I'm just telling you. I'm in League City.
Council.
I am. You did your research. Yes, and so we have a lot. I see these guys at HGAC all the time, the Houston Galveston Area Council. I see their county commissioners over there. Just to put this in perspective for my listeners from Brazoria County, because there are a significant number of them, your county had already given this Ascend Performance Materials, had already given them a $41 million abatement, according to Hal's article, that they'd already gotten from the county. They were now trying to browbeat ACC, Alvin Community College, to give them another close to $19 million tax abatement with a 10-year extension. And then if they didn't get that, that's just 1 month after they got their $1 million TEF award from the state, they're threatening to move their $1.2 billion project to Louisiana if they don't get what they want. And that's happening right now in Brazoria County. How do you like them apples, guys out there? There's 3 active Tea Parties out there that should probably start asking some questions that have been raised by this very report from hardhatters.com. All right, so you heard me probably describe in my intro coming into this second segment with you, Hal, that we discussed this type of crony capitalism and these funds a lot here at Raging Elephants Radio. And in fact, it came up in the Clear Lake Tea Party's panel debate with the 4 candidates, or the then 4 candidates for comptroller. And all of them excoriated the funds. All of them said, oh, well, I would do away with the funds. I would do this, and the funds are not fair, and the funds, they're rife for corruption, and all this, that, and the other. And I had a personal conversation afterwards with Glenn Hagar, who is now the anointed one for comptroller. And I said, you were on the board, on the finance committee for the Senate, and you've never raised a flag about any of these funds. You've never quibbled over them. You've never cautioned anyone. You've never warned anybody about the funds. Why should we believe you that now you're going to do something about it as comptroller?
Right, and we also had gotten a chance to interview Mr. Hagar, or Senator Hagar, which is on our website, and we had asked him about crony capitalism, and he reiterated what he had told you, that he wanted it to end. So whether or not he will, still remains to be seen. But there are areas where there are funds that the comptroller is a board member, specifically CPRIT, which got a lot of attention in this past summer because of Greg Abbott's relationship with it. And Susan Combs was on the board of CPRIT, and they were all responsible for while it's a different area, it's cancer research. It followed a similar structure as Texas Enterprise Fund, in that you had a board of elected officials and a few appointed members, and they all decided who got the awards and who didn't. And once again, you saw relationships between, political relationships between the board members and the companies that were receiving the awards. So.
You make a point of stating toward the end of your article that the Texas Enterprise Funds, one of many, has a stated main goal to attract businesses to Texas. And yet you point out the fact that 5 of the 15 companies that have received over $13 million in taxpayer dollars are already located in Texas. So a full 1/3 of the businesses that they're quote unquote trying to attract to Texas are already here.
Right, and that's just for the awards of this year. We didn't. I don't have the numbers on the top of my head of how many. Since the fund began, how many actually based in Texas, but. The purpose of the fund was stated as, and this is one of the reasons why you've seen Governor Perry go to all these different states. You've seen him in Maryland. You've seen him, all over the country, trying to, encourage companies to come to Texas. And that is supposed to be one of the purposes of the Texas Enterprise Fund, and yet we are awarding money to companies that are already in Texas, and they may have jobs outside of the state, and the Texas Enterprise may be trying to bring them back to Texas, but it didn't say to attract jobs. It said to attract businesses, and those businesses are obviously already based here. USAA, especially, is already based here.
Sure, right there in San Antonio. Yeah. And I'm a USAA member.
So am I. So.
Have been since I was on active duty. But you close very strongly in your article, and this is something that you even bring up Tesla Automotive, and I have done 2 entire shows about Tesla. And you say something that I think is very succinct. You say that just because they say they want Texas to be business friendly does not necessarily mean they are market friendly. And then you go on to discuss Tesla. You say, look, it's their version of being business friendly simply means being friendly to the highest bidding business. Tesla is not allowed to come here, and now Texas stands to possibly lose a $5 billion gigafactory with 6,500 jobs because we can't get it right because our dealers associations have completely suppressed the ability of Tesla autos to be sold in our state. That's not free market.
Well, all this comes down to, it all originates, you hear the saying, all politics is local. Well, and that's what originates. You look at Tesla and who opposed them? It was the automotive dealers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, many automotive dealers are who strongly fund or have the resources to fund the state representative, state senator candidates.
Correct.
And so the relationships start they don't start in Austin, they start in your hometown, and that's where it begins. Our voter turnout is so low that it's abysmal, and yet Texas, our state government affects us more on a day-to-day basis than the federal government.
It does.
And so you can't say you're a free market capitalist or you're a conservative or even you're a libertarian if you're purposefully putting your finger on the scales.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see happening is business, and not necessarily the highest bidding business, but the closest relationship business. Who are these politicians friends with? Who put them in office? And now the quid pro quo exists where they are returning the favor, saying, "Okay, well, you helped me get into office, and I'm going to help you, stay in business or improve your business." And that's not free market. That's the very definition of crony capitalism.
It is. I'm going to tell you something a little disturbing because when I ran for state rep back in 2011, 2012, and I didn't make it through the primary. I was outspent 50-1. And my opponent spent $850,000 in the primary and another $150 or so to get through to the election. So he spent about $1 million. A point that I made continuously on the campaign that I thought was relevant was about crony politics and how this type of candidate, beholden to so many different moneyed interests and huge donors and PACs, would not necessarily always have the best interests of the individual in mind. Because how would someone who's donating $25 stand in stature to an organization that donates $25,000? So I was making this case, and I thought that it was resonating. And come to find out, post-campaign, one of my other opponents had done some post-election polling, and he ran that question through the polls. You know, does the crony capitalism side of it bother you? Does it bother you when 94% of the donations into that campaign war chest are from out of the district, and from out of PACs and big special interests? And the response in this polling, Hal, was shocking to me and not so surprising to Ryan, but he's like, Heidi, people don't care. They shrug. They think that's how business is done. They literally had said that in their responses to the polls. Well, that's politics. Politics in Texas. The ones with the money run the politics.
And yeah, it's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. But a lot of that has to do with voter turnout and voter outreach. When you only have 10% of the population voting, or voting population, or the registered voters actually voting, you don't have democracy of mob rule. Mm-hmm. And so you have the vested interests and their network showing up to vote, and their vote is so valuable because there's so few voting. And these funds, these kind of slush funds weren't always business as usual in Texas until from 1876 to 1987. These funds would have been unconstitutional.
Yes.
And then there was Proposition 4 in 1987, which allowed these funds to exist, and it barely passed. And
what year was that?
1987. It was Proposition 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do my homework on that. So,
but for the longest time, the Texas Constitution was designed to prevent private individuals, private companies from enriching themselves off taxpayer money. And in 1987, that all changed, and that's why we see so much of this business as usual, which is business as usual over the past 25 years. And I think a big part of that is because of that proposition. So.
Before I let you go, I want to just get your comment or your insight on something that I have learned, at least from my perspective as a candidate and as an activist, more importantly, an activist. It has occurred to me, and I posted a picture on my Facebook page of this phrase, that I can't necessarily win on the money angle because my own integrity would prevent me from accepting money from certain groups or special interests, or to cede any amount of autonomy or independence in return for that money. And trust me, I have been offered. I had people offer to help me run in another election if only I stopped talking about Texas independence on Raging Elephants Radio. And that makes people uncomfortable. And they're like, she's got to quit saying that. She's got to quit talking about it. I'm like, okay, I have my freedom of speech and I'm not going to give it up to kowtow to someone else's demands. But it did occur to me that I can attack it from another angle. I can attack this problem because I'll never have the money they have. I will never have the ability to compromise my principles, or I will never be able to compromise my integrity. So I have to attack it from another end. And it's encapsulated in this phrase that the fewer things politicians control, the less it matters who controls the politicians. And so my perspective is we have to continue to scale down and trim back and remove departments and operations and other things from government control. Now, of course, my focus is Texas because I believe that the fewer things the government controls, the less it matters who controls our politicians. And I think that's going to be the only way for us to really kind of put our government back inside a Constitution-sized box where it's restricted to only the things that government is allowed to do within the mandates of the Constitution. But by trimming it back and by removing those things from government control and returning it to private control, then it matters less who buys our politicians. What is your insight on that, or what do you think with that? Agree or disagree?
Well, I think this is why it's so tough to enter politics in Texas, because you're asked to compromise so much if you want to get the money necessary to succeed. And unfortunately, it seems the best politicians are the independently wealthy ones who can stick by their principles without wondering, where their funds are for the next primary. Mm-hmm. But those are few and far between. And I think, like I said, I think voter outreach is extremely important to raising this issue, because I think just a lot of people, because they see this is how business works in Texas, they don't want to be a part of the political process as long as this continues. And so you see voter apathy, in epidemic, proportions. Mm-hmm. And as long as this business as usual continues, voter turnout will continue to be extremely low until things get really bad, or people's pocketbooks, their wallets all of a sudden get emptier and emptier. Yeah. And then I think you have to sell it as, look, our children, our tax dollars are being transferred to areas that are hurting us. I mean, if we look at the 2011 quote unquote education cuts, and and we look and we see funds that could have been easily cut to fix all that. And I think this is an issue that can cross both sides of the aisle, because I know it's more of anti-Perry sentiment, but Democrats cry out about this problem all the time. And you look at transportation and water, and we keep dipping into our rainy day fund. Well, we raised the budget by $26 billion, and we didn't have room for two of our most important issues. Right. And I think eventually, because we've seen this before, especially in the past, when especially with the oil bust of the 80s, is that energy money is not guaranteed for life, and we're assuming that it is. And once that happens, if we see another bust, all of a sudden, are we going to cut education, or are we going to cut the enterprise fund? That decision will have to be made, and people will have to decide who they want to side with on that.
Well, so far we've not managed to have the prudence to elect a legislature that will have these tough talks, that will make these tough decisions. And I don't care how tough Hagar and Hildebrand talked when they were on the campaign. Neither one of them lifted a finger to do anything about any of these special funds, not to warn their constituents, not to raise a red flag, not to caution, not to slow down. They continued to approve, and both of them, of course, as you know, ended up approving the budget with that 26% increase from one session to the next. And there doesn't seem to be any slowdown in sight. I think the spending levels that we're at now here in Texas, with a full 40%, 30% coming from the feds.
About out of the 100 or the 200 billion for our biennial budget, it's about $50-60 billion.
Yeah, so. And that leaves us beholden. That leaves us. And it leaves our children enslaved if we cannot learn to live within our means. Now, in the final closing paragraph of your article, you say that Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss all label themselves as conservatives. Hardy har har. They're all conservatives when they're running for office. Yet, conservatism embraces limited government and free markets. The Texas Enterprise Fund is the epitome of increased government influence and distorted markets. Very strong finish. And of course, I've already quoted what you said before. Just because they want Texas to be business friendly, or they want to say that Texas is business friendly, does not necessarily mean they are market friendly. And just because they say the words does not mean that they're necessarily conservative. Hence my efforts to continuously limit government. It's going to hurt. True reform always does hurt. But we're going to have to scale back and trim back. And I think we can start with these funds. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Well, Hal, you have been an amazing guest for me today. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Would you be willing to come back again in the future whenever you've got a big story like this?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
All right. Well, I have used hardhatters.com before when I've been talking with, and I've always posted your links to either our website or our chat room, and usually both, so that people can see the research that you guys do is top notch. And I think your writing is as well. And so your hardhatters.com is a regular stop for me.
Well, I appreciate you visiting us and spreading the word.
All right. Well, very good. Hal, I hope to have you back on soon. And anytime you do want to raise my attention to something, just shoot me an email, and I'd love to bring you back on the air to discuss it. That goes for any of your other writers as well.
All right. I'll do that.
All right. Take care, Hal.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, folks, that was Hal Hawkins of hardhatters.com. As you know, I've used their research before, and I've presented it to you before in the form of links or in actual articles on RagingElePhantsRadio.com. They're a great resource for us, and Hal, I think, is someone who, especially because this is kind of right in line with some of the stories I've been doing lately, or some of the discussions I've had lately on local debt, on the discussions with these. I still just get this sick feeling of regret when I look at the situation in the comptroller's race. I can't help it. Almost as much, if not more, regret than I felt in losing my own state representative race, because I just think, that we could have done so much better. But no, we got Hagar in there, and Hagar is part of the problem. I didn't want to put Hal into a spot of having to be openly critical when, in fact, the story in this case was about Perry, Dewhurst, and Strauss, who control hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that they gift to companies that don't need the money. When you're a $220 billion corporation like Chevron, you don't need $12 million in taxpayer dollars. You just don't. When you're a $10 billion or $11 billion company like Tenaris, you don't need $6 million in taxpayer dollars. When you're a $24 billion company, $25 billion, you don't need $1 million in Texan tax dollars like Emerson Process or Emerson Electric. What about Dow Chemical? A $57 billion company doesn't need $1.5 million of taxpayer dollars. Guys, they're telling us they can't afford roads. They can't afford freaking water. And yet they're giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to companies that don't need it. What does that say about the corporate cronyism or corporate welfare, the corporate mentality here in Texas? To me, I'm going to say it. You know what I'm going to say. This is Texan on Texan crime. They're stealing from Texas taxpayers, and they're giving it to corporations that don't need the money. There's even Hal covers this in his article. He says there's nothing wrong with large profitable corporations, but there is a problem when they become large and profitable on the backs of the taxpayer and reward politicians for opening the door. That is the very definition of corporatism, cronyism, crony capitalism, or corporate welfare. It's clear that they really don't need our tax dollars, as the millions given to them wouldn't make a dent into the hundreds of billions they earn every year. But wouldn't those tax dollars be better used to pay off our debt, fix our roads, or increase our water supply? Very well said. Hal is a gem, and I am so appreciative he came on the air with me today. Folks, stay tuned for Apostle Claver. He's coming up next from 2 to 4. And if you missed this program and you just came in for the second hour, you missed Liz Tice in the first hour, tune in again tonight at 8 p.m., or you can tune into our archives by tomorrow. Our archive material is being posted rather quickly these days, and that is a very positive step forward for Raging Elephants Radio. And I'm going to ask you to share the link. This is information, especially, that needs to get into the hands of everyday people, not just those of you here on Raging Elephants Radio that are hardcore patriots and activists. I'm asking you to share the link once it becomes posted in the archives. Folks, that's all I've got. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for Apostle Claver. God bless Texas, and all for Texas.
Have you ever found yourself hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, or anywhere else in the great outdoors? What about your own backyard? Stupid question, right? But how many times have you found yourself in one of those places without the right tools? Patriot Paracords wants to make sure that you're prepared for whatever's out there. They offer high-quality and affordable paracord gear like gun slings, survival bracelets, dog leashes and collars, keychains, knife straps, and more. We use the toughest 550-pound test line cord and can customize individual items by size and color. So if you want to be prepared for the unknown or just find yourself wanting to be fashionable, then you need to call Patriot Paracords at 409-960-1284. You can also find us on Facebook by searching The Patriot Paracords. Call 409-960-1284 or on Facebook search for The Patriot Paracords. You'll be pleased with the results, the craftsmanship, and the service. Prepare like a patriot with Patriot Paracords.